So I'm going to start off with lesson, seminar, whatever you want to call it, number one, talking about and kind of explaining and going through one of the most important things that I discovered early on doors. And I call this moment finding the note. Okay, drama. Sounds kind of dramatic, doesn't it? It's a lot more simple than that. I was at a party at a friend's house. And I must have been playing for about 5 years before this, and I was in bands, and we jammed and all this kind of stuff. I was very much into kind of shredding at the time and rock. Steve Vai was out. This was the 80s, and I love Living Colour at the time, Vernon Reid. So it was all about whittling. It was all about fast playing. And so I learned the shapes and and how to hold your pick and all those types of things. But it was this one evening that had the most impact on my playing, not just as a guitarist, but as a musician. And it was the moment that I always say, this is the moment I found the note. What it actually was is that I was at a party, someone handed me this old beat up guitar. It was a terrible thing. It had, you could kind of drive a bus through the strings because the action was really high. There was a nasty little amplifier that I can't even remember what it was. It was like a little 20-watt thing, and it sounded awful. And they handed this and said, well, can you play something? And just holding it, I was like, oh God, can I play anything? But what I actually did was I picked it up and I put a noise on, a sound. It was a bit of distortion. So I'll kind of try and emulate that with what I'm doing here. So I've got a pedal board down here on the floor. We'll do bits about pedal boards and so on and so forth. But I had a distortion sound on. So let me put a distortion sound on. Okay. It's probably going to hiss a little bit. Switch these things off. There we go. And all I did was kind of play the standard, when you start off, it's always these little pentatonic shapes because they're easy, they're like little block kind of, that kind of shape. But what I did is I went, and there was something about the fact that I had to really kind of push into this guitar that had an impact. I suddenly realised by going that when I started to play this amplifier, everything that I was doing was coming through the strings. And I was connecting with the sound and the way it interacted with the way that my hands were basically trying to tackle this awful machine. That suddenly there was an emotion in what I was doing. I can remember, just going up and bending a note up the top here. And suddenly, by just doing that, I felt differently about playing the guitar. It was like suddenly, actually, I'm an emotional thing now. Listen. And just that action. Suddenly, this changed playing for me. Because I was having the control of my emotions through what I was doing. And I never even thought about that before. Now that made me think, that got me into thinking a lot about this, well, the instrument that you're playing and how you approach it and how you attack it with the technique and with all of the different parameters that you've got within the chain is going to make a huge difference. So the first thing to say to anybody is experiment with everything you can in a way that is just not giving you any kind of preconceptions about what's going to happen. Okay? I'm going to do that with this channel on this. This is just a kind of 20-watt head, and it's it's a bog standard kind of Marshall. But I'm just using the clean sound on here at the moment. Now the thing about a guitar is it's just so expressive. The dog agrees with me. I love sounds. I love to be able to use different sounds. But the important thing here isn't the sound itself, but it's how you play the sound and what you do to interact with the sound that you've got, okay? Because every sound that you've got in terms of pickups means that the way that the amp responds and the way that your fingers respond will be totally different. So if we have a clean sound and we just kind of just wander through the different pickup sounds on this, these are quite a dark sound. So that's the first pickup here, which is the one that's always the mellow pickup. You can hear it's a little bit darker than a Strat kind of pickup. Okay, go back one. And it's got that kind of more of a, some people call it the duck quack kind of sound. Now listen to the way that I'm pulling in on that. Now I'm deliberately not attacking the string there, I'm pulling it out quickly. Because what I'm doing is as I'm doing that, you can see I'm scuffing the string. As I scuff the string against that particular sound, it starts to give me a totally different sound. Go back to the original sound. Doesn't work for that sound, but it does for this one. So instantly I'm thinking about, oh, pick's slightly different for that sound. Maybe I'm attacking it slightly different. Go to the middle pickup, different sound again. Next one down. And then of course the humbucker. Now a humbucker is a really interesting sound for distortion. But for clean sounds, it can be a bit of a kind of descript sound. If there's a little bit of distortion coming through, all of these sounds mean that you react differently with your instrument, and that's the key to it. The key to this is to experiment with how those sounds react. So we're going to do a little bit of an experiment with some of the pedals and see how they respond. I'm not interested at the moment in any of the technical aspects of how I'm playing that. I'm just literally going to explore the sounds and how hard I pluck, how I use both of my hands on the instrument, and how it responds to what feels right for me. Now, as you get drawn into this, you're going to be sort of favouring some of the sounds that you like. Some of the things you don't like, you're not going to. And that's a really important point about anything that you do musically. For everything that you like, someone else will absolutely detest it. Does that mean it's got any worth? Well, of course it does. It's all just opinions at the end of the day. You know, there'll be people that sit in pubs argue for hours about who the greatest guitarist is. But they're the people in the pubs arguing about being the greatest guitarist rather than just playing and finding their own way. You know, I used to struggle with sounding like me when I was younger, and I wanted to sound like someone else. And then I realised when I was kind of in my late 20s that actually I always sounded like me, and that was probably the best asset, was that I did sound like me, whether I was playing the drums or the bass or the keyboards or the guitar, then I sound like me. And I realised that's because I've always taken the kind of this kind of journey where I follow my ears and my heart as to the way that something's going to sound. And if you can pull them together with your the technique and things that you develop, and I tend to have developed things because of frustration of not being able to do something, and that's really what technique's all about, and facilitating the your knowledge. And if you get stuck, knowledge is great because it can get you out of a hole. Let's go back into this finding the note and going a little bit further with that. Let's go into distortion for a second. I'm going to put the distortion channel on. Now you'll probably notice that it's a dry channel at the moment. So what you find with high gain players in particular is that they can have something that's very, very, very highly distorted, and that means playing fast is kind of easier because it all mushes all the notes together, which is great, but it means that the definition of what you're doing and the feel of what you're doing you can sometimes struggle with, and it can be a little bit harder to get some of that dynamic in what you're doing. So again, if you're a high gain player, experiment with these sounds, experiment with the way that the guitar interacts with what you're doing. One of the things that distortion is amazing at as well is that if you have any pickup, the distortion responds very dramatically to how much you roll the volume off. And of course, depending on this type of sound or the effect you're going for, you're going to get a completely different feel. You're going to get a completely different attack. So it's like if I roll the sound off, the more I dig into that note now, you can actually hear it's making the distortion work. So again, it means your fingers are going to have to work a little bit harder, but your sense of your own sound and the way that your individuality is coming through is really going to kind of shine. See, that every single thing that you do, it responds differently. If I'm slicing the pick, you hear the difference in the sound. Hitting the artificial harmonic in there, although they're not actually artificial, they are harmonics, but they're called artificial harmonics because you're basically splitting the string down with part of your thumb, which is the same as if you're splitting the string here. More about that in another video as well. But anyway, this idea of controlling, what you need to be doing is thinking about how hard you're playing down and what that dynamic is. So hear the sound now. Got my gain right off. Now of course this is a really dry sound. It's got nothing but a little bit of distortion that's coming through the actual channel of the amp. But that's good because you're hearing it kind of warts and all, and it's all about developing those things, warts and all, and work out what do you like. You know, I like some of the glitchy bits. You know, I like some of the sounds in there because I think it kind of adds to my personal touch and my flavour of what I do. And again, it's all about developing what you want, not what someone else wants. The thing that made a big difference to me was a compressor. I think I started using a compressor when I was about 17, and it was down to the fact that in the bands that I was in at the time, couldn't really hear what I was playing too well. We were playing a lot of kind of 16s type of that type of thing, and if you that type of thing, you know, we were in bands that were into Jamiroquai and things going on. So you'd be on a note going that kind of thing. Now I realised that it wasn't. It was a bit scraggy, and so I had a birthday present. Actually, it was a B5 from Boss, and it had a compressor on it. And there was something about this compressor that I really liked the sound of, and I assumed that all CS3s were exactly the same, and then I bought one and it didn't sound anything like the one in the Boss, and I was like, oh dear. Well, I found out afterwards that actually there are 3 versions of the Boss CS3, and the first 2 were made in Japan, and they've got different chips in them. They've got DBX chips, and they are very different in the way that they respond. What I loved about the compressor was the fact that you could ride this sound. I'll show you. Hear that? That's off. So it makes it nice and creamy. Now, obviously, some people like that, some people don't like that. That's, again, about finding your sound. For me, I love the particular sound of that DBX CS3, and I've got a couple of them. I've still got the BE5 as well. What I really liked about that is that you could do that kind of thing. But what I also really loved was the way that that responded with the distortion, okay? Now you could say that it's a bit spongy, but I like that because when I got the distortion on, so let's go into my distortion channel. The only downside with compressors, they do tend to be a bit noisy, so on my other rig I've got a noise gate in there, but this is something that you know, it's just for this. It's a bit noisy, but hey, you know, a bit of noise is no problem, it's rock and roll. So listen to the way that this now responds on that channel. Now listen to the way that the compressor everything up dramatically, but it allows you to really dig those notes in, and once you start digging the notes in, you go to a different pickup sound. See, it's got that lovely tone. Again, it's dependent on what you're after, and it's not about me saying that, you know, this is the ultimate tone for everybody, blah blah blah, but it's about the sound that you are looking for and how this thing reacts to the... Can't stress that enough. If you're going to get work as a guitarist or as a bass player or as a drummer or as a keyboard player, it's about having your own sonic personality of the things that you can do and you can do well. You know, there are lots of people that like to be versatile. I think being versatile is a cool thing, but having your sound is really, really important as well. You know, study other people by all means, but experiment with finding your way and your sound, because the interaction of those things and how they respond is going to make a big difference. So I've just touched upon, you know, exploring sound, but hopefully you can start exploring sound as well, and just pull it really simply. You know, it's about exploring the sound, the vibrato of your fingers, the way that that's responding, but does it feel good? You know, that's the most important thing that you're asking yourself when you play something. Do you like the feel of it? As you do things that you don't like, modify those things so that you do like them. Hear the way that the channel's working against the pickup sound. Ask the questions of what you're doing. Respond to what you're doing and find the note in what you're doing. And sometimes the note is about being really simplistic and working that through. Hope you like this one. Subscribe. See you on the next one. Cheers.